Hello YouTube. So today I'm going to show you how to build a basic iOS 8 app using the new Apple Swift programming language. Okay, so the app that we're going to build together is just a simple weight logging app. Allows the user to enter in their weight and track their weight daily. So you can go to that log your weight button. The user can enter their weight. Brings up the number pad with decimals. So let's just enter in a basic weight. They can choose between kilograms or pounds, and then they can save their weight, and it goes directly to a log. So this log has your date and time that they entered this weight, and then they can go back and enter in multiple weights. Okay, so 250, save weight, and then it builds up in your log. And the user has the ability to delete any number of logs that they use, or you can clear the whole thing. Okay, and now one important thing is we're using CoreData to implement this app. So if we save this weight 150.5 at 2:54 p.m. and then let's say we exit out of this app and then go back, the data should remain. So if we go back to the log, here's our 150.5 at 2:54 p.m. Okay, so let's get started. Let me first just close out of this, and now let's go into Xcode. So let's create a new Xcode project. Let's start out with just a single view application. You can start with an empty one, but why not just let Xcode set up the template for you. So we'll start out with that, and we'll call this weight logger. Okay. The language is Swift, device universal, and make sure you check this box, use CoreData. Let's go next. Sure, save it there. Okay. So the first thing I'm going to do is just set up the main user interface, okay, and then I'll go in and tie everything to code. So here's our first view controller, and Xcode already gave us the viewcontroller.swift file for that view controller. So let's go to the storyboard and set up the main screen. Okay, so if we click on this view controller, change the size iPhone 4-inch portrait, so we have a nice layout here. What we need first is a label, okay, for the title. So let's go down here to label, drag a label up to the top, and then we also need a button. The button's going to transfer us from the main screen onto the enter your weight section. Okay, so let's make this button a little bigger, and let's change the name. So this will be log your weight. Okay. Let's just make it a little bigger, center it on the screen, and this label can be, we'll call it weight logger. And let's increase the font to say 25. Okay. I'll just drag it to both ends, move it up a little bit, and then center it. Okay. So here's just the main screen. Let's just run it real quick, see if everything's working all right. So again, I'm using iPhone 4S on my template. So here's the main screen. We click the button, doesn't do anything, but the app's working right. Okay, so let's go back, and now let's implement the next screen, the next view controller. So we go to a regular view controller. This is going to be where the user is going to enter in their weight. Portrait. Okay. So now to get to this screen, let me drag it over here. To get to this screen, the user actually is going to click this button. So what we're going to do is, well, actually no, not first. On this view controller, we want to actually embed this first into a navigation controller, because from this enter your weight screen, we want to be able to get to a log which has all the weights, if you can remember from the beginning. So the first thing that we should do is click this view controller, go up here to editor, and then say embed in a navigation controller. So we embed this in the navigation controller. So you see there's a navigation controller came up, and it already makes the connection for you. Okay, let's move this over here a little bit. So now this view controller is embedded inside of this navigation controller. As you can see, you have this navigation bar at the top already. Okay, now we can connect this button to this navigation controller. So if we control and click and drag this to this navigation controller, we get the action segs. So in this, you can choose whatever you want. I'm just going to say pop over presentation. Okay. You can play around with them and see the different results that you get. So now when the user presses this button, it'll take them directly to this view, which is nested inside of this navigation controller. Okay. So before we run it and test it out, let's just add a title to this navigation bar, and we'll call it enter weight. Enter weight, sure. Okay. And then let's add 2 bar buttons. So one button here to take you to the log, and then another button to take you back home. So if we come here and go to bar button item, click and drag this up here, and then we'll just hold down Alt and click and drag this. It makes a copy. Okay. So now on this one, let's change the name of this to home. So when the user presses this button, it'll take them back to the main screen. And now on this one, we're going to change it to log. So it'll take us to the log. Okay. And now again, before we run it, let's create another view, so that when the user presses this log button, it'll take them directly to the log. So since we're going to have a bunch of weights, what we want to use is a table view. Okay, so we can use a table view controller and put that on the storyboard. Change this to 4-inch portrait. Put it right here. So now we have a table view controller here, and now when the user presses this button, so we'll do control, click and drag this log button to this table view, we want to do a push. So the push, you see it brought up this navigation bar here. So now inherently we'll get a back button to come back to this enter weight since we used the push seg. Okay, so now let's just save and run this real quick. See what we have. Okay, so here's this main screen. So if we say log your weight, it takes us right to this enter your weight screen. We haven't implemented this home button yet, so it won't go back home. But if we go to log, you see it takes us to this table view where all the weights will be stored, and then we inherently get this enter weight button, which takes us back to this screen. Okay, so again, that's not working, so let's stop it. So everything's working fine right now. Okay, so let's add a little more user interface onto this view controller here. So what we want is a text field where the user actually is going to enter their weight. So let's just put that about 2/3 of the way up from the bottom. And just make it 160 wide. You can make it whatever width you want. Now the placeholder text, we're going to say enter your weight, ... Okay. And then we're going to need a button. So let's put that right in the middle of the screen. And the button is going to say save your weight. So when the user presses this button, it'll store the weight onto the CoreData, and then it'll bring them directly to this table view. Okay, so save your weight. Let's make it a little wider and center it up. Okay. And now let's add a switch, which will allow the user to go from kilograms to pounds. So if we just put the switch right here, and then we need 2 labels, so one for the kilograms and one for the pounds. Again, if you hold Alt and click and drag this, there we go. So this is going to be kilograms, and this one's going to be pounds. Just make it look a little better. There we go. Okay. So now I live in America, so most people use pounds. I don't hear many people use kilograms, in the US at least. So I'm going to leave this switch in the on position so that right when you get to this screen, initially you'll be in the pound selection instead of kilograms. But anyway, like if you move this to kilograms, it'll stay in that state, so it won't always go back to pounds. Okay, so now we have this. So now we have save your weight. Again, once they save their weight, what we want is it to go directly to this view. Right? You don't want to save your weight and then be stuck on this screen. So let's add another seg. So control drag this to here, and it's going to be another push. So we have two push segs, either from the log or the save weight will get you to this screen. Okay. Now again, let's just run it real quick, see if everything's working all right. Okay, main screen, log your weight. Okay, everything's here. You can change from kilograms to pounds. Home button doesn't work. If we click log, it takes us directly to this. Let's go back. Now if we click on save your weight, it pushes us to here, which is what we expect. And now enter your weight. Okay, so now here's one problem. When the user enters or clicks on this text field, the alphabet comes up. What we really want is the user to enter in a weight, not digits, or have to go down here and click numbers and then use this. So one thing that we can change is actually once the user clicks on this, bring up the number pad with the decimal. Okay, so let's stop running this. Click on the text field. Now if you go over to this, well, I forget the names of these all the time, attributes inspector, you can see keyboard type. So it's set at default right now. So if you click it and go down to decimal pad, there's also a number pad, but it just lacks the decimal point. In this case, the user is going to be entering, say, like 150.5 or something like that, or at least gives them the ability to. So we click on decimal pad, it'll bring up just the number pad with the decimal at the bottom left. Okay, so that's good. So now the user interface here is done. So the whole thing's actually done. The whole user interface is complete. Now it's all about just tying the buttons and storing the data in CoreData. Okay. So one thing we need to do now is actually create a view controller for this view and this view. So we need to make two more view controllers for both of these, since we already have a view controller for the main screen. Okay. So let's start out with this one first. Okay, so let's come over here and go to File, New, File, and let's create iOS source, a Cocoa Touch class. Okay. And now it's going to inherit from UI view controller, and we're going to call this one enter your weight view controller. Okay. Again, it's a Swift file, so let's go next. Sure, save it there. Make sure this is checked. Create. Okay. So now it created this one for us, and now I'm going to just delete these comments down here. We're using a storyboard, so we don't need this initialize function. And then let's just minimize these for now. Okay. Now let's go back to here, and if you click Command N, it brings up a new file. So we need another Cocoa Touch class, and this time it's going to inherit from UI table view controller. This is for our other, where all the weights are going to be logged. So this is going to be weight log table view controller. Okay. Swift file again. Next. Sure, save it there. Okay. So now we have many more methods come up. So you have all these methods down here for a table view, which are added, which we will end up using some of them. Okay, so let's get rid of this init function again, since we're using storyboard. View did load. Let's just minimize some of these. Okay, that's fine for now. Okay, so now what we should do first is actually connect these view controllers in our storyboard to the view controllers that we just made. So if we click on this enter weight one view controller, and we come over here to the identity inspector, you see right now the custom class is just a UI view controller. So if we click it, here's the class that we just created, enter your weight. So let's click that, and now this view controller will be tied directly to the enter weight view controller.swift. Okay. Now again, just like that, let's do the same with this and change this one to the the weight log table view controller. This one. Okay. So now we have a location where we can store. Let me get rid of that. where we can start writing some code. Okay, whoops. Just save it real quick. Oh, one more thing I forgot. So now this home button, we have to tie this back to this. So let's just do a control drag on this, and we'll do a modal seg to that. Okay, save that. Okay, so now let's start writing some code for this view controller here. Okay, so let's just get rid of that, move this over, and let's click on this button here, which will bring up the assistant editor, so we can have the storyboard on the left and then the code that's tied directly to this class on the right. So here we have the enter your weight view controller right here. So now what we can do is actually get an IB outlet for this text field and this switch. So in our code we can say, okay, once the user enters this, in our code we'll have the value for what they entered. So if you hold down control and click and drag this to here, we're going to make an outlet, and we're going to call it it's a text field weight. So text weight. Connect. So it creates the IB outlet for us with this variable, and it's LVUI text field type, and it sets automatically equal to nil. And now let's create another IB outlet for this. Control drag this to here, and we're going to call this units. So this is the units that the user selects. Okay. Now we need to implement an action, an IB action. When the user presses save your weight, it should take this weight and save it into CoreData. Okay, so right now let's do a control drag on this, and we'll create an action, and we'll call it button save pressed. Okay, connect. So it creates this function for us, and now we can start implementing. So once we get in here, the whole reason we're making this is to save data. Okay. So that's all the connections we need to make for here. So let's actually start implementing CoreData then. Okay. So let's go to, let me move this. Let's get rid of the assistant editor. Save real quick. Go back to this. And now let's go to the weightlogger.xc data model, which is actually our CoreData tables essentially. So let's create a new entity, and we'll call it user weights. Sure. Okay. Let's create two attributes, actually three attributes. So the first attribute is going to be the weight that they're logging, and it's of type string. You could do of type integer or something else. It's just easier to store it as a string. The second attribute is going to be the date, the current date, and that's going to be a string. And then the last attribute is going to be the units. So we can store the pounds, kilograms, and again, that's of type string. So we've created this user weights table with these attributes here. So now let's actually create a custom class to interface between the table and then our view controller. So it'll make it easier. We don't have to do a fetch by ID, things like that. We can use a custom class and access the table directly. Okay. So let's create a new file. So Command N, and let's create a Cocoa Touch class. And this time it's going to inherit from an NS object, NS managed object. Okay. And let's call it the same as our table is, so user weights. Okay. It's in Swift again. Next. Create. Okay. So now we get an error here. The reason we get this error is because we haven't imported CoreData yet. So let's just import CoreData, and then that error should go away. And now let's create the variables that we're going to use that are, or the attributes that are in our table. So let's create, use @ns managed variable weight, and then this is of type string. Okay, and then we're going to create two more, ns managed variable date string, and then another one ns managed variable units, which is of type string. Okay. So now we have these three variables, which are the same as the attributes in our table here. So it makes it's kind of like an interface to get from our code in the view controllers, so we can access these members here directly. We don't have to do a fetch by ID. Once we get back a managed object, we can simply use the dot notation and say ns managed object dot weight or dot date and get those values from the table. Okay. One more thing I forgot. Let's add at Objective-C. I got this from RM2K Dev. Very helpful tips right here. So you have to create this at Object-C, and the reason being is so that this file is presented the same to Objective-C as it is to Swift. So CoreData can actually find our class. Okay, so we use at Objective-C, and then enter the same name here. Enter weights. If I spelled right. Okay. And now back in the Xcode model, we can click on default here under configurations and add the class here. So if we can add here, and then we can enter user weights, which is the name of the class we just created, the custom class. Okay. Again, this is from RM2K Dev's video. This was very helpful tips. Otherwise, you'll throw an error. Okay. So now let's go back to our enter weight view controller and start implementing CoreData. Okay. So first, we need to get a reference to our app delegate. We have the ns managed object context. So we need to first get a reference. So variable, let's call it appdel. It's going to be of type appdelegate. And this is going to be UI application dot shared application dot delegate. And then we're going to cast that as an app delegate. Okay. So this is a reference to the app delegate that's inside here, okay, this app delegate. Now we need to get a reference to the ns managed object, or the context actually. So let's go back to our enter weight here. It's variable, call it context. And it's of type ns managed object context. And you don't actually have to explicitly say what type it is. Next to Swift now there's type inference, so you can leave that off. So it's going to be the appdel that we just created dot managed object context. Okay, what's this error about? And let's manage object context. Use of undeclared ns managed object context. Oh, I know why. The reason being is we haven't imported import CoreData. Sorry, guys. Okay, so now once you import CoreData, that error will go away. Okay, so now we can use. So now we have a reference to our app delegate, and then the context here. So now we can let's create or get the entity so we can insert the objects into our custom class. Okay, so let's say let ent, which is reference for our entity, equals ns entity description dot entity for name. Now the name of our entity, which we just created, was user weights think it's user weights with an S. Yep, user weights with an S. And then in managed object context, it's going to be the context that we just created. So context. Okay. Now we can create a new instance of our custom class, which references the entity. So we can create a variable new weight equals user weights, and then we have two constructors here. We'll choose the second one. So the entity is going to be ent, which we have here, and then insert into managed object context, which is context. Okay. So now we have an instance of our class. Let's just create a little variable, instance of our custom class, reference to entity. So now using new weight, which is an instance of our class, and it has a reference to the entity, we can simply say new weight dot weight or dot date or dot units and access the data that's inside of our table. Okay. We no longer have to look up by the ID or anything. Okay. So now let's fill in the core data. Okay. So we can say new weight dot weight equals. Now we're going to use the value that the user entered into the text weight text field. So it's going to be text weight dot text. Okay. And now let's do the units. So first we need to check if the units are on or off. Again, like we said, if the units are on, it's going to be pounds. If the units are off, it's kilograms. So let's do a simple if units dot on, which returns a Boolean. So if it's on, then do that. Otherwise, it's off. Switch is off. Then do that. So we have new weight dot units equals, if it's on, it's going to be pounds. Then if it's off, new weight dot units equals kilograms. Oops. Okay. Now the last thing we need is to actually do the date, the current date. So we're going to use an NS date formatter to get the date in the right format. Okay. We could use the NS date like this constructor. Let's check. So let's do let date equal this, but this is actually going to return not in the right format. You'll get the right date, but you'll actually get in a UTC time, and so if, like me, I'm on the East Coast, so it'll be off by 6 hours or so, and also you'll get data that you don't need. So let's use a date formatter. So we can use let date, we'll call it date formatter equals an NS date formatter, and then we'll call that. Okay. Now let's create a variable. So the current locale, which is of type NS locale. So we're trying to get wherever the user is, it'll automatically detect by what they have in their settings on their phone. So we do current locale equals the NS locale dot current locale. So based on the user settings, it'll automatically detect where they are. Okay. Now let's create a format string. So variable format string. It's going to be of type NS string. This format string is how you want the date to be output. So let's go back to the app that I have right here. So we want the date format to look like this. So you have a day, the month, or not the the name of the day, the month, and then the actual date, 19th, and then the time. Okay. We don't actually care about the year right now because I mean, it's the middle of June right now, so who's going to log their weight that long? Okay, so let's do this. Create an NS date formatter, and then we'll do date format from template. So the template that we're going to use, which I got this from the Apple developer log, they have one for date and time programming. So you simply do capital E D M M M space H colon MM and then A. Okay. Now the options are going to be 0, NS locale is going to be current locale. Okay. You can reference, like I said, that the document they have to see exactly what this is, or you can go to hold command and click this, and you can take you right to this where all the methods are. You have the method right here. So date and time format styles, date from format. This is the one that we're using. Okay, so this is just a basic template. Okay. Now we need to create the actual date, right? So we call date formatter dot date format. So we set the format in our object to be the format string that we just created. And now let's say new weight dot date, so we can actually set the date now, equals date formatter dot, and then we use the method string from date ns date. Okay, so again, like I said, you could just use ns date from the beginning and you'll get a very different response. So I could just do a print line here, whoops, and show you the difference. So if we print out the new weight object here, and then let's print out, oops, print line, we'll just print out ns date here. Okay. Okay, well actually first we need to save this data first or else we'll throw an error, but we'll come back to this. So we'll leave that there at the bottom. Now we stored all the data into the attributes or the members of our class, so new weight.date, units, and weight. So now the next thing to do is actually save this data into our table. Okay. So what we can say is we reference this context here, so context dot save, and then I'm not gonna do any error checking here, but that's where you would use like an ns error and just check the error inside here. Okay. And now another thing I want to implement is right when the user pressed this button, it's automatically going to switch to the other view controller. However, what we want to do is clear the text box. So we'll say text weight dot text equals empty string. Okay. Just delete all these new lines. All right. So now this is cleared, and now what we're going to do is print out the new weight object and print out the date. So we should be able to save this, and let's see what happens. Okay, so the main screen, so click log your weight. Now when we click on enter your weight, oh, this is going to be a problem. Let's implement first hiding this keyboard, because right now if I enter a weight, I won't be able to click save your weight. So let's hide this keyboard first. But as you can see, here's the decimal point and the number keypad came up. So let's just stop this, and let's implement hiding the keyboard. Okay, so we'll come down here. So we need two more methods. So this will be, oops, hide the keyboard. So we'll use function called text field should return. Takes in a text field, and this is a UI text field here at the bottom. And it returns a Boolean. Okay. So text field should return. So if the user presses the return button, it should return back essentially when the keyboard should hide. So we say text wait dot resign first responder, then return true. Okay. Now the next function that we want to implement is if the user enter or clicks somewhere around the screen, not the return button, the keyboard should hide as well. So actually, if we click on command, click this, we'll come here, see what methods there are inside here. There should be a method. I'm not sure. I don't see it in here, but we can simply just write it. Let me just move the screen up for you a little bit. Okay, so let's implement a function right here. Function touches began. There it is. Oh, whoops. So let's delete this. So touches began. So if the user touches the screen anywhere, we want to hide the keyboard. Okay, so what we can say is self.view.end editing. Force it true. Okay. So now the keyboard should hide. So now let's go to run this. Let's test that out real quick. So log your wait. We click in here and we click outside somewhere so the keyboard hides. If we click anywhere. There's actually no return button, so that function was useless. But at least we implement this one. So now if we enter in the wait, let me bring up the console. 1, 2, 3 in pounds. Click save your wait. So we see it automatically goes to this log your wait screen. It doesn't display anything, but here's what we've saved. So we've saved the date in this format. So Thursday, June 19th at 3:33 p.m. The units are pounds, and the weight is 123. Now here's the output if you just simply did ns date. So this is what you'll have as your output instead of a formatted date like this.